Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. And my guest today is EveAnna Manley, who's the owner of Manley Labs. And if you don't know about Manley Labs, you should, because they make some of the highest quality audio gear on the planet right now. It's hard to find a traditional studio without at least one piece of Manley gear, and rightfully so. Stuff is great. Anyway, we'll talk to EveAnna in a little bit. But first, let's look at the news. Recently, what was in the news was iTunes, and for a number of things, actually. First is that the downloads from the iTunes store are down about 13.3% from the last year, which is an awful lot. And actually, last year, downloads were down about 14% overall. So downloads are pretty much over, or at least they're heading that way. So Apple is now looking at what to do in the meantime. So we've been seeing a number of things happening. The first thing was their introduction of iTunes Radio, which was really big at first. The first month, they really got a lot of people. I think they got about 20 million people that signed up right away. But it hasn't made much of a splash since then. And in comparison to Spotify and Pandora, isn't really doing much. Spotify and Pandora are getting stronger, and what we find is iTunes Radio is getting, well, I can't say it's getting weaker, but it's not getting stronger. It's kind of the same. The other thing that they have to worry about is a Deezer, which if you don't know about Deezer, that's the big Spotify competitor in Europe. And they're going to launch in the United States, in North America actually, sometime this year. They're a very, very big deal, and a lot of people, at least in Europe, like them better than Spotify. So when that happens, I think you're going to find iTunes Radio is going to lag far behind. But what we're seeing is a number of rumors that are happening, and the rumors are that Apple is actively talking to all of the major record labels about two things. The first thing is offering high-res files. So you know that last year they instituted, this is Apple instituted, their high-res audio program, or Mastered for iTunes program, as they call it. Mastered for iTunes, or MFIT, the way the record labels call it, means that you actually upload the high-res version, the master version of your file. So if you've done it in 9624, for instance, that's what you'd upload, and then Apple does the encoding to AAC for the iTunes store from that. And what they consider to be high-res is anything that's 24-bit. So even if you have a 44:1 resolution, it doesn't matter, because if it's 24-bit, they still call it high-res. Since they have now a catalog of high-res uploads, and most record labels, major record labels anyway, are all doing this. Just about everything is now uploaded as an MFIT. As a result, they're now in a position to be able to sell high-res masters. And the rumor is that they'll charge you an extra $1 for that. So instead of the $1.29 premium for the download, now it'll be $2.29 or $1.99 or something around there for a high-res master. Will people actually buy that? Now, by the way, the high-res master is going to be an Apple lossless coding. So right now, AAC is a lossy codec, which means that it throws away some information and it changes the sound. In some cases, it changes it a lot. In other cases, it changes it not so much. But with the lossless codec, in fact, you find that it's pretty much the same as the master. Will people buy that? I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I suspect that some people will, but most people really like streaming. So I don't think that they're actually going to be enticed because of a high-res master. That being said, Apple's also talking about starting its own streaming network, and of course they've been talking about that for a while. The difference in the services from iTunes Radio is what they call a non-interactive streaming service. Non-interactive means it plays like radio, so you can't actually go in and dial up your own songs. You can't say, I want to listen to this particular song, I want to access that particular song. You can't. You can basically call up a playlist, and the playlist maybe will have that artist or that song, but maybe not. Now, this new service will be different in that it will be truly interactive. So just like Spotify, you'll be able to call up a particular song, and that's what will come up. Will we see this soon? This requires a brand new licensing agreement, so it's not something that can be quickly ironed out. But the word is that Apple is now in the process of doing this. And will it overtake Spotify and Deezer and all these other interactive streaming services? It's yet to be seen, although Apple does have a lot of muscle. And if they got behind it and if it was a better system than what's out there, then yes. But it has to be substantially different in some sort of way. So we'll see how that goes. Also in the news recently was a company called Declutter.com. Declutter is Decluttr. Declutter.com. And what they do is they actually buy all of your old CDs, DVDs, and games. So any bright and shiny disc that you have that you don't want, they will buy for a minimum of 50 cents, and it might be more. And what you actually do is you go to the Declutter website and you type in the barcode number of the CD, and they have a smart algorithm that determines how much they're going to pay you. So if there's something that's extra special that there's either a lot of demand for, or they find that there's not too many of them in the website, then what they'll do is they'll pay you more money for it. Now, why do they do this? Well, apparently there's a high demand for certain DVDs and CDs and games. And it's worth it for them to buy a lot of crap in order to get the really good titles. What they do with the really good titles is they turn around and they sell them for obviously a lot more money on eBay or on Amazon or any of the other e-commerce sites that are out there that are sort of consignment sales sites. Also, they have their own website that they sell off of, which apparently is undergoing a revamp right now. That being said, this is pretty interesting because if they have too many of a particular CD or DVD or whatever it is, they still buy it. And the reason why they do that is they figure that if there's one that they don't buy, and maybe it's the first one, the first number that you put in, barcode number that you put in, and they don't buy that, you may not go beyond that. So they may not get their choice at something that might be good. So they just buy everything. And if they have too many in their warehouse, they keep the good stuff, recycle the rest. So last year alone, supposedly they recycled enough CDs, DVDs, and games to make 2.6 million ballpoint pens, to make 1.1 million traffic cones, and to make 7.2 million golf tees. And that's just in the last 12 months. So what are they looking for? Well, there's a bunch of really hot sellers. One is Green Day's Insomniac. Another is Judy Collins' Living album. Another is Neil Young and Crazy Horse's Weld, which I've never seen a copy of. Or a real outside gem is Steel Ice Band's Now We Are Six. So these are some rare titles, and that's what they're getting a lot of money from. So go to declutter.com if you want to get rid of those old CDs in your closet and see if, in fact, you can make a deal with them, and you'll wind up getting some extra room back that you didn't have before and a little bit of cash in your pocket as well. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, send them to questions@bobbyoinnercircle.com. That's questions@bobbyoinnercircle.com. My guest today is EveAnna Manley. She's owned Manley Labs for quite a long time now. And Manley Labs makes some of the highest quality audio gear that you're going to find anywhere. And you're going to hear the story of how Manley Labs came into being and how EveAnna actually got her chops, which is very cool. So here's EveAnna. Today, my guest is EveAnna Manley from Manley Labs, and she is one of the most knowledgeable people in the pro audio business, and one of the nicest, too. Everybody loves EveAnna, and I'm one as well. She's helped me out numerous times in the past and helped a lot of other people as well, and I'm just so thrilled that you're with me today.
Thank you, Bobby. It is my pleasure to be here with you. You're one of my best buddies for a long time, too. Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. It's funny. You never actually know a person until you interview them. And I've known people forever and ever. And when I finally interview them, there's always things I learn. And there's something I always wanted to ask you, and that's, how did you get into electronics? I mean, you're so knowledgeable. How did that happen?
You know what? Every day when and especially the last couple of weeks, I've been really geeking out with getting this core done too. And I realize how much I don't know. Definitely. Anyway, I've actually learned a lot in the last couple weeks just working on this. Just like now I know all about, attack and release constants. Something I didn't know as much about before. How I got into business initially, I was the proverbial band geek, like a lot of us were in high school. And I really loved my music theory. I liked math a lot in sciences. So I was like geek in that way anyway. But the electronics world just didn't really exist to me. I didn't know anybody who played with electronics. I didn't know anyone who built things or hacked electronics or anything. I mean, my thing when I was a kid was like building tree houses. And even though my stepdad owned Ampeg in the 60s, he had sold it long before he met my mom. So that wasn't, I just heard the cool stories about, the Rolling Stones using Ampeg and all these famous people my dad knew and all that. So that was in the back of my mind as being an attractive thing in the future. I might want to get in the rock and roll business. When I was at college at Columbia, one day, the great impresario Bill Graham came to our class to teach us about the music business. And he gave us the famous 5-finger, you got your artist and the producer and and I was amazed. I was sitting in the front row and it's like, oh my God, that's Bill Graham. He's on my Janis Joplin record, Fillmore East West. Oh my God, he's sitting right here. And I had it that day, that minute, I had it made up in my mind. I would take a semester off of school and I would drive out to California and go find BGP, Bill Graham Presents, and go talk myself into a job. So that was my plan. So what I did actually is I took my semester off, drove out to California. I stopped in LA to see some friends, and I got a job for 3 weeks with my old band director, just doing some inventory for him for his business. And then Dad had given me 3 names to call. And I called the first guy who was at Acoustic, and he did not pick up the phone. That was Rich Mandela from Ampeg. He didn't pick up the phone.
That was Acoustic Amps, right?
Yeah. He was with them at the time. And then he might back up. He might have been at Serwin Vega by that time. Anyway, he didn't pick up the phone. This is in 1989, so no one had cell phones and things like that. The second guy at Fender, Roger Cox, I called him, and he didn't know me or anything, and he didn't really have any, didn't want anything to do with me, really. He just put me on. He said, call these 2 guys, these crazy South Africans in Chino. They build tube amplifiers. And I put those 3 things together. South Africans, Chino, tube amplifiers. I'm like, I don't know. But I did it anyway. I called them. And I went to interview for a job with David Manley. And I got a job basically learning how to solder. Mexicans teaching me how to solder, which is great because I didn't speak Spanish. And making tea and, just learning from the very, very, like I was an intern, basically. So that's how it started.
So how long did you do that then?
Well, at the time, our products, none of them really had schematics drawn. So within a few months, I was on the QC bench and I was testing things. And these are the early days where we're just starting. We had just won a big contract with a certain quasi-religious society we all might know, and we won a bid to build them 60 mic preamps. Those guys out in Hemet.
Yes.
So anyway, they like this mic pre-design. We built 60 of them, and all of a sudden we're not just in the hi-fi business anymore. We're also now in the pro audio business. And
so it was just hi-fi when you started.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was just, that first day when I walked into VTL, I saw these things sitting on shelves with chrome and black panels and tubes sticking up, and I'm like, what are those things? I I didn't know what they were. I mean, a tube amplifier, we had a Fisher receiver growing up. I thought a tube amp was, in a wooden box and, with a metal faceplate.
Yeah.
Oh, you actually look at tubes? I see. I didn't know what they were, just even looking at them. Anyway, so yeah, we quickly graduated from just being an audiophile company to building pro audio stuff. And then we started on the Pultec EQ. And again, we're reverse engineering a tube tech that was borrowed from Coast Recording. And just drawing the schematic, this is all before we had any computer CAD programs or anything, So my first kind of tech job was reverse engineering stuff, and including our own products, because not everything had a drawn-out schematic for it.
Wow.
When I was on the QC bench, maybe a mic pre or early days, say the first version of the variable mu or the LOP would hit my bench and there's no schematic drawn out. And I don't know what I'm trying to measure, check my volts or whatever. So I just reverse engineer our own products. So I got that under my belt pretty quickly.
Yeah, but that's a good way to learn, though, having to do that.
And the other thing was, so many of our products were just kind of half-baked, and a lot of them were very noisy or they hummed. And I learned a lot about how this stuff works by learning how it doesn't work. And so a preamp would hit my bench and, everyone's like, I'm like, no, wait, this thing's humming, man. We can't ship this with this much noise. Listen. And everyone's like, nah, just ship it. It's fine that way. And I'm like, I want to try to see if I can get it quieter. So I would just start monkeying around. It's like, all right, well, this transformer, all right, he's too close to this. This is a high impedance value. He's just dying to pick up this noise. Maybe if I move the transformer. And so I'd start experimenting very basically, like, putting transformer on leads and getting it 3 feet away and then putting it back in. And listen to that noise. And then rotating and relocating, or then playing with shields, metal pieces to deflect the shields and things like that. So I learned a lot about stuff, just trying to fix or make better the products we were already building and selling. It was crazy. And, they didn't really want me to do that because that would imply that the designs were less than perfect to start with.
Yeah, right.
So it was kind of difficult times, It's not like I was being encouraged to do these things because of the ego problems and so on.
How did Manley Labs come to be yours?
Well, so those early days going on, we're building pro audio gear, we're building hi-fi gear. David and I got married the year after. And then his son, Luke, was also, he was running the business basically. And the father and son were fighting all the time about distribution matters a lot and just different points of view. And there was, anyway, the companies VTL and Manley needed to split. And there was a lot of kind of personal chaos going on at that time between those guys. And so David bought this building where we're still at here, and we moved all the Manley stuff over here. And then Luke stayed on with VTL. Where it still is, just down the street, about 2 miles down the street. So we separated the companies in 93, and then within 3 years, David went off the rails again and moved to France, basically. And at that point, I could have just gone back to Atlanta and continued on with picture framing or something, or, found... Actually, I had an offer from a very large guitar amplifier company who had come down here and met me. And I actually had an offer to go run his factory because I was running the whole factory by that time. And that worked to my benefit because it's like, well, when David and I were getting divorced, it's like, well, how about you sell the company to me and I'll pay you, or I'm walking out of here and I'll just go get a job with those guys up in Petaluma, or I'll go back to Atlanta. I'm 20, whatever. How old was I? 28 years old, 27 years old. I got lots of things I can do. And I'm, no one else is running the factory. I am. The whole thing's on my shoulders, really. So I negotiated a deal with him. And by 99. That's when we actually signed the papers, but I was running the factory on my own since 1996. So that's how it, during the divorce and the payout and the buyout, that's how it became to be mine.
And VTL then, that eventually became yours as well, right?
No, not
No?
at all. No, Luke still runs VTL. That's his company, and it's also in Chino, but we're completely separate companies.
Oh, I had no idea. But
Yeah.
you
Since
distribute it for them?
19, no.
No? Oh,
Since 1993, the two companies separated completely.
okay.
And
I thought somehow you were somehow connected.
nope.
Okay. Well, I had no idea. Okay. One of the things that's really interesting that I've always found is Manley Labs has always had a soft spot for mastering.
And hell.
How did that happen?
Um, that first year when I was out here at VTL, I remember the first studio I ever went to was actually Precision Mastering. And David was working with those guys early on to improve their monitoring setup, so the tube amps got hauled in. And then we started building equalizers, and then later the early version of the variable mute and so on. And the mastering, we were just always involved with the mastering guys to start with. And I think it's because the way I see them, they are kind of right in the middle between the audiophile world and the professional audio world. So,
Yeah.
and it suits, it's kind of like where we are too, because we also straddle that same hill. We've got 1 foot in the audiophile world and 1 foot in the professional audio world.
That must be interesting because they are separate worlds, and they, for you, they coexist, but for a lot of other manufacturers, they don't. How does that work?
Well, another thing I just thought of at the time, in the early 90s at VTL, Steve Hazelton was moonlighting with us and also with, I think, Sunrise Pickups at the time also. And still working for Doug Sachs at Mastering Lab. And our friendship with Steve was totally instrumental to my career because he would tell me stories like how Doug and George Massenberg would sit and listen to gold switchcrafts versus silver switchcrafts, or this wire versus that wire, or a gold switch versus a silver switch, or whatever it was, right? And I was inspired by that, and I'm like, wow, I'm gonna go take a bag of capacitors down to Jackson Brown's studio and go listen to capacitors all day with my buddies over there, and start listening to wire and components and things like that. And I think the ear training, the listening training that I garnered doing that so early on, really helped me. And that again, it happens in the mastering rooms a lot too, more so than recording control rooms. I think those kind of really fussy, picky little minutia listening tests. As years went on, we'd usually be doing those tests in a mastering room, like over at Eddie's or over at Precision or something like that.
Yeah. Eddie's meaning Oasis Mastering.
Yeah.
Since you spend so much time in the audiophile world, and that means you have a lot of products that you're doing because they're different products, right? That you have, especially like even the amplifiers, which, you'd think that an amplifier would work for one against the other genre, but it doesn't seem to, right? There's different
Not too
requirements.
often. There's been some isolated cases where we've sold big tube amplifiers into recording studios or mastering rooms. Again, Precision Mastering was an early adopter. We had some big Manley 350 watt amplifiers at Electric Lady for a really long time until just kind of recently. Groove Masters, again, Jackson Brown Studio. He had big tube amps there. Doug Sachs had his own tube amps, so you see that, but generally you don't see big tube amps in the pro audio world in a monitoring situation in general.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's just one product, a power amplifier. And then when you go into the line amplifying world, we've often built a line amp that could be, you could change the gain and now it's a mic pre, or you de-gain it and you've got something else up in front and it's a line preamp, or it's a makeup gain amplifier like after a passive EQ. So a certain circuit that we use all over the place, your basic tube amplifier cascaded circuit into a white follower, that shows up all over the place in both audiophile and pro audio products that we make. So those get down to your building blocks, or a power supply design. It might be very similar between the two worlds. Just your functions and what the thing is actually doing is what and the cosmetics and all the other things and features and so on. That's what's going to make a lot of times one design different from another.
Is the audio requirements different? Do audiophiles look for something else, or want to hear something else than the professional audio guys?
Well, I think they do. There's a certain kind of beauty that they want from the sound. They do want an extra voluptuousness sometimes in the sound. The 3D and the imaging and all that stuff, that's where they really get excited. And well, what I'm saying is that we've been kind of trained in that audiophile world, listening wise, to listen for those things. And when we're building our pro audio equipment, we're not trying to take those things out, though we've already made our gear sound that way anyway. So it's kind of like audiophile gear built for the pro audio market, or the converse way that I look at our products is it's really durable, rugged, solid, reliable, good customer service gear built for the audiophile market. A lot of philosophies about different parts of the gear cross-pollinate between the two markets, in my view. But not a lot of companies straddle both these worlds like we do.
What I found interesting was I was looking at your website earlier today, and I love the section, the mausoleum section, which is all of the products that you no longer make. And it made me wonder, you've really gotten into a lot of products, and a lot of esoteric ones that there has been a call for. I saw there's a lathe, for instance.
Yeah, we built some lathe electronics for our own mastering room when we were doing recording out in the early 90s out here in Chino. Yeah, that's crazy stuff.
And the SRM-10s, the tannoys?
That's, again, a joint project with the mastering lab. And but David had the relationship with tannoys. So he was, in the early 90s, he was able to commission the last production run of that driver from Tannoy, and I think we bought 300 of them or something like that, which is a lot of bucks. We had some bucks that we could do it, so I guess that we had the bucks, Doug had the crossover, and we teamed up and built out all the speakers. And then still today, I build the cabinets and crossovers if you've got the drivers.
Yeah, that's a secret, isn't it?
And I pay Doug his royalty, so we still continue that today. But that's a very specialized product. And some people might ask, why do you continue to do that? We only sell, I guess, 10 pairs of those a year or something. It's not a lot. But I like keeping them available because, the minute we stop building something, everyone's like, but I need one.
Yeah.
So,
especially those, for those of you listening who don't know what we're talking about, Tannoy made a speaker, the SRM-10, which is 10-inch driver, in a nice wooden cabinet, but there is something special about everything. And you find so many mixers that are using it. And I know people that hoard them that will have, 6, 8, 10 pairs, so just in case anything ever happens.
Yeah.
And because there is something special, the frequency response, everything is like perfect for mixing. And that was really one of the first... it's a little bit bigger than bookshelf, but it's sort of bookshelf model that everybody started to use, even before the NS10s.
Was it before the NS10s? Wow.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, that Tannoy driver, if you find an original pair of SGM10 or SRM10s, you can yank that driver out and roll them into the Manley Mastering Lab cabinets and crossovers. And and we do that. We keep that alive.
Another thing that I always find interesting, whenever we talk, you always tell me about your microphones. And I think that's sort of a secret weapon. When people think of Manley, they think of equalizers, and they think of mic amps, and they think of a lot of things. But I don't think for a lot of people, microphones are, first on the list. But yet you have so many big clients that are using them.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks to Steve Hazelton, he developed that microphone circuit with us back in before 1990, or maybe the early part of 1990. We debuted the Manley Gold mic and the reference cardioid mic at the AES show in Los Angeles in 1990.
Wow.
It's that early. And
Yeah.
the first sale of the gold mics, a pair of them went to Sean Murphy because Steve knew Sean. And then a bunch of mics went down to the BOP studios in South Africa. A lot of gear went down there.
Yeah.
And then in 92, we signed up a new agent in Sweden. His name's Robert Zima. And he still sells our gear in Sweden. And he got a reference cardioid mic in with Max Martin early on. And Max was using that microphone all through the 90s. And we were wondering why our dealer in Orlando was selling so many of them. Well, it's because Max was down there too, and all those Disney-based bands, and Britney Spears, and all that stuff was being cranked out, and it was all with the Manley Gold and the Ref Cs. They both of them get used a lot. Skip to the 2000s. Dr. Luke bought one when he was still with Saturday Night Live, and now we all know what he does, and he cranks out a lot of pop music, and they're recording so much of that stuff with the Manley reference cardioid mic. And a lot of people want to do what he's doing, and so we're selling. That's our hottest seller, actually. We sell more Manley reference cardioid mics than any other product we make.
No kidding. I had no idea.
It's true.
Wow.
Well,
it's amazing. And yet, I don't ever remember seeing any advertising or much advertising.
Nope, it's just been a kind of sleeper. I have to say, my nephew Chris, also, when he was working for me, he was hauling that reference cardioid mic around. He made it his personal project to go around LA and get it into some guys that he knew. And it helped create the groundswell that really exploded in the last several years. So thanks, Chris.
It really makes a difference. John Jennings at Royer did the same thing and actually kind of kicked that company off.
You bet.
There's a lot of other products that you didn't build, but I guess you licensed the design. Longevin is one, and Starbird microphone stands is the other I can think of. And how did that come about? You don't make either one anymore, right?
Those were two brands that David picked up from different sources in the early 90s. One, Longevin was owned by Mark IV at the time, which is some big corporate kind of music owning group.
I remember
that. We had a buddy from the Sapphire group who knew somebody, and Longevin brand had just kind of gone silent for a number of years. So I think we basically picked it up for about nothing, I guess. And we just used it at the time to build solid state products so that it was clear Manley is tube stuff and Longevin is solid state stuff. And Starbird was picked up from another buddy, Ron Newdahl, up in San Francisco. And he was just getting overwhelmed with building those boom stands. So we picked that up from him also with the CR3A microphone, if you remember. And that was early Chinese microphone imports. And not, you didn't have it like it is now, where everybody and his mother's bringing in a mic from China.
Yeah. And
that was a very early, all Chinese built microphone. That mic we put later into the Longevin stable. But when at that time, this is early 90s, and I'm QCing the mic, so I get the box of microphones from China, and I open them up one by one, and sometimes parts would fall out on the floor. And I okay, which part fell on the floor? Oh yeah, this bad soldering. Yeah, okay, right. And then over time, it was just so frustrating. We finally told that Chinese factory, okay, how about you guys just quit trying to solder? Why don't you just send us the capsule, which is decent. It's quite good. And they somehow don't really screw that up. And send the metalwork, which is acceptable, and the transformer, that's fine. And we'll build the PC board and assemble it here with our guys that know how to solder. So we did that for a really long time. But then the Chinese microphone thing kind of exploded in the market. And I'm looking around and I see, you can buy retail 2 Marshall microphones made in the same Chinese factory for the same price I'm paying for a capsule, a body, and a transformer. And I'm like, yeah, screw this. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're just getting priced out because we weren't selling thousands a year. We were selling hundreds a year. So we continue with the capsule only, which is the same capsule that's been used in the reference cardioid mic all these years. That's how that worked.
And you no longer make the Starbird, do you?
No, it just, again, the quantities were kind of low and they were really expensive for us to make here in America. And we've just got the whole thing kind of tabled for right now. And it's not to say we couldn't go find some new sources and get the price clever so we can actually make $1 on it. But the other thing, $1,000 boom stand, it's also, it's pretty expensive for, I don't know. I've just put it aside for now.
It's maybe the best boom stand ever made, though. The best boom stand design. For those of you who don't know, the Starbird is, if you ever look at any old pictures, studio pictures of the 50s and 60s, and you look at the boom stands.
Sinatra pictures from Capitol, it's all Starbird booms, right?
Yeah. And there's just something special about those. But I could see why they'd be expensive to make, because they seem like even for back then, there seemed to be some precision that you wouldn't find elsewhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of cast parts that need to be machined and honed and broached and all kinds of. The machining process to get the raw cast part into a finished clamp is excessive. It's crazy, and it's certainly too expensive to do in this neck of the woods. So I've just put that all aside for right now.
How do you decide to do a product? What? I think in the past. From what I know about you and from our conversations, it was a little more. The decision was a little more laissez-faire than it is now. But how do you decide?
There's 2 ways. The one way is the designer noodles around for as long as he wants to and makes something, after a long time that he thinks is the best. And then we say, oh, okay, great. Let's add up the cost of all the parts and how long this monster will take to put together. Oh my God, the retail price is going to be crazy. Shice. Well, all right, let's build it. So that's the one way. So you end up with a product that's, maybe it's pushing the envelope of great sound and stuff like that, but it's really expensive because it wasn't designed from the onset to be easy to build. It was just designed to sound great and all this. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. So these days, what we do is we say, okay, what do we need to build? We need to build let's just take this last example, a Voxbox combo strip thing, but half the price. Okay. Because then we know, well, we're going to sell a lot of them at $2,000 as opposed to over $4,000, right? All right. So now we have a mission clear in front of us from the onset. It's not somebody, just coming up, dreaming up something and presenting it to us. Do you want to build this? So we're tackling it the way probably a mature company would do it.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're doing now. So we define the product. And it doesn't mean we've defined all the features or all its switches and buttons yet, but we've defined what the product's going to be and what that retail price is going to be. And then we divide by our very humble magic number and we see, okay, whatever we're doing, it cannot cost any more than that.
Yeah.
And then we've got every choice we make, we have to make sure that we're not exceeding this price, because if we do, we're not going to sell as many because it's going to be too expensive. And it might have some great features and this and that, but what this whole process that we're doing now helps us do is design for production and design so the thing pops together and flies together so we can build lots of them here, because we're still not sending stuff to China to get built. It's all made in Chino, California, not China.
That's impressive. Well, you do your own metalwork and everything, right?
We used to have a CNC machine in the building, but that was sold to some sheet metal guys down the road that wanted to get into milling. So they still run all our stuff on our old CNC, our old Moriseki machine, just 2 miles down the road. It's amazing. And our anodizers are local, the powder coaters. We do our line graining here. We do all the final polishing and finishing before it goes to anodize here, because if there's one scratch on the product, the guys are going, I want $200 discount.
Yeah.
So we try to take care of those really fussy little details. And that's what we do ourselves. We think that we can do it better than the commercial people around here.
How do you deal with feature creep?
Yeah, let me introduce you to the Manley Stingray eye tube. His name is Feature Creep. That's an instance I'll plead guilty where, it's like, oh man, we can make it do this too. Stop everything. Let's do that, and I've been very guilty of that, and I have to totally restrain myself from doing that because it just gets too expensive. Because every knob, every pot or every switch, every pot you put on, now you got to add a knob. Now you got to add labor to screw that thing to the faceplate and the cost of it and blah, blah, blah. And it is feature creep, and it makes the price go up exponentially. So, the whole thing is to try to get a rough bill of materials together earlier on in the design process, define all the features that are going to be on there, and just be very disciplined about not keep adding and adding and adding to it, because then it just gets too expensive.
Once upon a time, Manley Labs was kind of known for, well, you still are, you're known for your tube expertise, but known more or less as a tube exclusive company, but that's not the case any longer, is it?
No, and some of that has to do with my husband, Dave Collins, he's an avid solid state fan. He's
brilliant
also
designer
too.
Yeah.
But he's really helped teach me the good things about op amps. Yes, there are good things about op amps. And it's an area of electronics that I'm personally learning more about, because I think I was affected a little bit by kind of some brainwashing and, this overbearing, almost like a religious thing. What do they call this? It's like power of personality or something like that, where, people are saying things that are a little overblown and not altogether true, but you believe it like you'd believe a religion or something. So I'm not saying tubes do not rule, but there are benefits to all the technologies implemented correctly or well, and everything can sound good, actually.
Do you have a problem sourcing tubes these days?
Sure, because you only have China, and you have some stuff in the Slovakian Republic of Slovakia, and you have some factories in Russia, and that's it, pal. And the new old stock stuff, that's pretty much, there's not a lot of stuff out there anymore.
Yeah.
If it's out there, it's probably been through many people's hands several times, and I sell my rejects back out onto the market. Probably so does everybody. So, as far as new tubes go these days, you don't have a lot of choices. And when we're designing products, we have to totally consider that. Who's making a good 12AX7 today? What else can we get that's made today that's easy to get? We're going to design around those kind of tubes. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to design on this goofy tube that you can find 3 of on eBay.
Yeah. Well, do you find that there's one factory that's better to 12AX7s than another one that's doing EL34s or whatever you're using for a power tube?
Oh, yeah, well,
6550s or whatever.
Power tube world and small 9-pin tube world, the different stuff there. And you have to evaluate each type of tube, or each tube type on its own merit. We've got cases before where, we're using, right, just say a 12AX7 in a certain circuit for a long time from that factory, that Russian factory. And then all of a sudden they'd go noisy, we burn them in here for a week or two or whatever. We send them out to the customer, and within a few days, they're all making a bunch of noise at the customer's house, and they're basically dying, which indicates, bad cathode coating. And so then we tell the supplier, hey, send us some from September, send us a batch from October, send us a batch from November, send us, 10 more from December. And we're testing each month's output and selecting like, oh my God, the September ones all had the problem, but the October ones were good. How many of those do you have in stock? Oh, good. Send us those. And it's crazy that we have to do that, but we have to do that.
Wow.
They can vary. I mean, but other times it might be a couple of years where there's no real problems. But you just have to be ready for the problems to be there, I suppose. So we put in a lot of time. We've got jigs and a lot of test fixtures and burn-in jigs and things to select the tubes before they're even put into a unit. And every single one of those little tubes gets burned in. And then depending on what circuit it's going into, there's some specialized test procedures we'll do. Like for the variable mu, you want all the pluses and all the minuses to line up. So you want the two triodes inside the bottle to be very similar. And so there's a special jig that will step through tubes and say, you are very well matched triode to triode, so you're good for variable mu. And this other tube, you're not well matched. And you can go in another kind of circuit that doesn't require the match. So we try to get a lot of usage out of all the tubes. We don't want to be just throwing away tubes. But yeah, every tube, after all the pre-testing, also gets listened to on a special little noise jig with headphones by a kid, and he grades them. There's a needle. It says, okay, your noise level 82, good. And he writes that down with a red pen on top of the tube, and all the tubes are graded. And then, you don't need to put the quietest tube in the world in an output follower where there's no gain. So you want to reserve the quietest tube in the world for, say, for microphones where you've got a lot of gain at a high impedance. And that's where you need the world's quietest tube. So we try to, populate all the chassis with inappropriate tube.
So labor intensive. Geez, no wonder why everything is so expensive. Wow.
Well, it is. That's the way it is. And that's, our customers demand that type of quality and attention from us. But also conversely, that's what you do pay for, is all this kind of pre-testing and pre-matching of not just tubes, but also like for the massive passive, all the coils, all the chokes get matched left to right.
Wow.
The cards, the band cards are on one PC board, and the two sections are loaded up with twin parts, so the caps are measured and batched, and everybody's loaded in, and then at the very end, those two cards snap apart, and that's left and right. And so, matching stereo pots and just, we've gone through where we take the front sections and back sections apart and measure them all and put them in a database and write the math and hit a button, and then it says, okay, front section of pot number 52 is a good match for the back section of pot number 286. And then you reassemble those two guys as husband and wife. It's crazy. But that was in the input of the variable mu when we had the pot. And you know why that is, Bobby, is because I know why. I figured it out. It's because guys are mixing with their eyeballs, not their ears.
Yeah.
And when they're looking at the screen and they say, oh my God, my left channel is a half dB louder than my right. What? Oh, this product, this variable mu is broken. I'm going to send it back to the dealer. And they're just having a cow about it. And it's like, dude, just whack up the output control a little bit. It's fine. You've got discrete controls there. Just no, it's broken. I'm going to send it back. So then we're not selecting for half dB matching anymore. Now we're selecting for quarter dB matching across the whole pot, stereo left-right match. And do you know how crazy that formula gets to be even fussier? And now you can hardly match pots to that tolerance because they're like 10 or 20% parts. So it's really hard. But and you can't even barely hear that half dB. I mean, the definition of a decibel is what you can really hear the difference between.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we can hear the difference between half dB, but when you're getting down below that, it's like, come on, the difference is so small. If you just like touch the output control, it'll change enough to make up your difference there. The lines on the knobs have more discrepancy than the stereo pot we're trying to match for, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but isn't that an inherent problem with tubes where after they after some part of their life, when they start to fail and it's a slow fail, everything changes though, right? Your frequency response is changing, gains changing, all that stuff.
Oh, really, Bobby? If you're unless you're using circuits with no feedback, if you're using, if you've got a decent amount of feedback, that's correcting for those errors all the time.
Okay.
You're not really going to get that much level kind of difference or frequency response difference. I'm talking about initial production. The difference, if you look at all the componentry used, each part has a tolerance rating. If it's a 100K resistor, it's going to be 110K or that's 90K. So you got this spread there, a 20% spread there, the plus and minus 10. The tube doesn't really have that per se, especially when you've got a corrective network around it called feedback that's making it do what it's supposed to do again. But all these parts, resistors usually are, like 1%, so we're not going to have a big difference there. Capacitors can be 5, 10, 20% parts. Potentiometers the same. Inductors can be, we have to struggle to build consistent inductors that we do here that are like within 9%.
Wow.
And that means, these millihenries over here within 9% of the other ones over there, and keep them all. And that's because it's like a physical thing. It's like how tight is the core material smashed together. And if it's a little looser, the inductance will change in the part. It's just, so we have to be very consistent when we're building those things and actually lock them down with a meter attached, watching the inductance change as you smash them together and lock them down there.
I hope everybody listening to this appreciates what that means in terms of labor.
It's a lot.
It's incredible. What's it like being a woman in a predominantly man's world of pro audio?
Well, Bobby, it's all I know.
But there's not many women.
I don't. In my daily life, I'm not really thinking about that. I've always just got a job ahead of me, or a problem to solve, or something to figure out. So I'm not thinking about who I am in that, really. I'm thinking about the problem.
Yeah, right.
I'd say I like guys, so I'm glad that it's an industry full of guys. No, seriously, I don't know why there's not more chicks in the business. I guess I think over time a lot of this is changing in education, where you've got more girls studying math and science and being encouraged to get into robotics programs and things like that, and it's okay to be a girl geek. I think that's really changed a lot over the years.
Last question for you. The state of audio manufacturing these days, what's it like? Just the overall state of the business as a audio manufacturer?
Oh, well, we're doing all right. The more, again, back to this problem where guys are mixing with their eyeballs instead of their ears, because there's so much stuff in the computer. And maybe I don't want to put this the wrong way, but maybe, a lot of guys are doing recording as a hobby or just for fun and all that kind of thing. And they're not they're not Al Schmidt. They're just having fun at home recording their buddies. Sometimes those kind of guys will reach towards, a piece of gear like, okay, if I get this exotic, crazy one great mic pre or whatever it is, okay, then my stuff will sound great. And, in other industries, and I can see where that happens. Like, okay, say I play golf 4 times a year, right? I'll go out and buy a nice set of golf clubs. And in my head, it's like, well, at least I can't blame the equipment anymore. It's
Right.
all on me.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I think that's it. I'm glad. I'm glad that there's a place for high-end audio products today with really good, merged with really great computer software and convenience and all that kind of stuff. It's cool.
Well, you do it better than just about anybody.
Thank you.
I got to say, thank you for being with me today. This has been great. It's fascinating as always. I love talking with you anytime, and I hope we do it again real soon.
Thanks, Bobby. Let's go get a steak again soon, huh?
You got it. Absolutely.
Okay.
If you want to find out more about EveAnna Manley and Manley Labs, go to manleylabs.com. That's Manley Labs, MANLEY Labs, LABS.com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, send them to questions@bobbyoinnercircle.com, questions@bobbyoinnercircle.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby O's Inner Circle, go to bobbyowsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to bobbyoinnercircle.com. At bobbyowsinski.com, you'll find links to my blogs, coaching programs, and book excerpts, as well as a sign-up form for my newsletter as well. This is Bobby Owsinski, and I'll see you next time.